The world just experienced its hottest April on record, extending an 11-month streak in which every month set a temperature record. This is what the European Union's Climate Change Monitoring Service has said. This latest report further highlights that each month since June 2023 has ranked as the planet's hottest on record compared with the corresponding month in previous years. To discuss the key findings and to understand the consequences, we have with us climate change expert Nagraj Adve, who's also the author of Global Warming in India, Science, Impacts and Politics. Thank you so much, Mr. Adve, for joining us on The World 24/7. This report highlights that worldwide average temperatures were almost 0.7 degrees Celsius higher than the period from 91 to 2020. And Eastern Europe, Eastern Asia and Africa have been hit the hardest, sir?
Yeah, that's right. But that baseline actually already incorporates a very high level of warming. The actual baseline should be pre-industrial. And if you look at pre-industrial, 2023 was 1.45 degrees higher. And currently the 12 months, as you said, is about 1.6 degrees higher according to the Copernicus data. And we need to understand why this is happening. I mean, there are certain long-term global factors, and the main one is relentless global warming that's taking place because greenhouse gases trap the heat. If you look at it in an interesting way, it traps the heat equal to about 9 Hiroshima bombs, energy of 9 Hiroshima bombs every second. That's almost 1 million bombs in any single day, day after day after day. That's one. Secondly, there's the El Nino, which is the ocean current. And even in past El Ninos, say in 2016 and 1998, it happened that the year following the El Nino, as is the case right now, was exceptionally hot. But the fact is that the current El Nino, which just ended, is not as severe as the previous two super El Ninos I mentioned, which implies that the underlying factor is relentless warming. These are two global. A third factor, which is specific to India, is more, and this is local and regional, is that we had less snow and rainfall in the preceding months, in the winter and in spring. And that what does is that contributes to a higher level of warming in the pre-monsoon and summer period.
So are we looking at a new normal here then? Is it going to get worse? In fact, this report also highlights that oceans have also measured record temperatures in April for the 13th month in a row.
That's right. That's right. And that's because over 90% of the massive heat I mentioned earlier, trapped by greenhouse gases, goes into the oceans, right? And actually, a very large area of the world's oceans are experiencing marine heat waves. And in fact, there's a very interesting study by Professor Roxy of IITM Pune, which says that going forward, if we don't cut our greenhouse gases, the oceans, and particularly the Indian Ocean, is going to be in a permanent state of marine heat waves of about 220 days a year. Now, what that does is that it also impacts marine species. I mean, in that sense, the impacts of excess heat are not just on human beings, but also on other species as well. And that has resulted in a lot of marine species having to move their geographical location. Yes. For example, two key species like sardines and mackerel, which used to be found off the Kerala coast, have now moved northward, and they are actually now near the Gujarat coast over the last 30 years.
In fact, sir, you've said that it's sobering that in the not too distant future, 2024 will actually be considered a relatively cool year. That's incredibly worrying to say the least. But at this point, can it be regulated?
Say that again, can it be regulated?
Yes.
Well, the only way, the only way that it can be regulated if there's a sharp cut in greenhouse gas emissions. Because the latest science suggests, unlike say earlier 10 or 15 years ago, the latest science suggests that if we stop greenhouse gases completely, or if we reach net zero, which is a concept that's talked about so much, right, then actually warming stops increasing. That is not to say that warming will stop entirely. What it means is it will stay at the level where we are. Suppose we stop right now, then we'll stop at 1.5 or wherever we are. We are actually at about 1.2, but wherever we are right now, right? But stopping greenhouse gases is a far more complicated problem, as has become very obvious. And that the emissions of greenhouse gases are very deeply linked to, in a sense, the way in which sort of the world economy kind of functions. Clearly, it's a very deep challenge. But what that implies is that going forward is that there is going to be further warming. Also, the rate of warming in recent years has kind of risen to about roughly 0.25 degrees per decade. And what it implies is that we are going to cross this 1.5 degree mark that is mentioned in the Paris Agreement. And this has extremely grave implications, I should point out, for for millions of working people in India, because the impacts of
Indeed.
excess are extremely unequal and hurt working people the most.
But sir, with the kind of geopolitical tensions we're seeing around the world, war, conflict, many actually question whether people have the time and energy to give the climate the attention it deserves.
Well, I think they have no choice, because slowly what's going to happen as warming continues and extreme events become more and more frequent and intense, which actually has already happened in the last few years, it is inevitable that global warming is going to become right in the front of your radar. I think this is reflected in the current elections. Even though it's part of manifestos and so on of political parties, it actually is not a serious election issue. It's going to become one, there's no doubt. So, yes, it's true there are other geopolitical tensions, but it's also already the fact that in many ways, questions of climate change and energy are intersecting with geopolitical tensions to be on the forefront of the discussions at many international, very serious international fora. There's no doubt, but it's going to deepen going ahead, as warming kind of continues. And I think what's needed, I think what's missing is the urgency. We really need to address
Indeed.
this issue with graver urgency if we're going to sort of slow down the rate of warming.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for joining us on the World 24/7 and helping us understand the consequences we face.
Thank you, Pat.